You're up, Kathleen.
All right, thanks, Amy. Good afternoon. Thank you to all who are joining us for another session of our Workforce Collaborative Training Series. Today, we're very excited to have Marek Parker, MSW Program Director with BestSelf Homeless Services, with us for LGBTQ+ inclusion and bias. A few quick reminders before we get started. At the end of this session, we will be asking everyone to complete a very brief evaluation. Please take a moment to fill this out so we can continue to improve our training series. Amy will be posting that link into the chat towards the end of today's presentation. Our next session will be Tuesday, October 28th from 12 to 1 on the practice of digital wellness, connecting with reflection, intention, and critical thinking. And the presenter will be Leah Jacobs, LMSW. The registration link is posted on our website and will be emailed out soon. Amy will also be posting this link at the end of our session. We are always looking for new presenters and are interested in hearing what topics and speakers you would like to hear from. If you're interested in doing a 1-hour presentation, or if you're interested in a particular topic, please indicate that on your evaluation, or you can email Amy at amy.rockwood@erie.gov. The Erie County Department of Health is launching a Bridge Erie to Harm Reduction Learning Collaborative, and their first session is on Thursday, September 25th from 12 to 1:30. We encourage you all to register for this training series as well. Amy will be posting the link at the end of this session. And some of you may have gotten it by email because it was emailed out to our listserv as well. The recording and slides from today's presentation will be posted to our website within the next few days. Just a reminder that our presentations and recordings from our past offerings are posted to our website as well. We actually have 5 years worth of amazing trainings posted. So if you have new staff, have them check this out, or if you're looking for info on a particular topic, we probably have that there as well. Today's training is being recorded and everybody is muted. I'll be monitoring the chat during the presentation, so please place your questions in the chat and Marek will be answering those as we go. Again, thank you to all for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce Marek Parker to talk to us on LGBTQ+ inclusion bias. Thanks, Marek, it's all yours.
Hi, first I want to make sure you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, good, because I paused it for a second. So, hi, I'm Marek Parker, and I'm just going to start right into the presentation. This is rather lengthy. Some of it I'm going to skip. Oh, that goes to our second slide. Sorry, let me get back to the first. We got ahead of ourselves, which I've done before. This is our first slide. That's my contact information. I'm the program director at BestSelf for Homeless Services and the chair of the Western New York LGBTQ Task Force of Western New York Homeless Coalition. Normally we go through introductions where everyone goes around and introduces himself. We obviously won't do that. But the goal of this is to give providers and employees the necessary tools to better understand the unique issues and needs of the LGBTQ+ clients and coworkers. We will examine current practices, suggest adopting new practices, as well as educate on issues that impact the community. I've added a lot of information and data on items that impact our community because I think there's a greater impact on what's going on. And so we'll get into that. The LGBTQ+ community is not a single entity. Just like other communities, there are many different viewpoints, beliefs, and truths. My story of who I am is different, yet shares a certain commonality with most every other LGBTQ+ person you will meet. So please, please, please understand, I am telling you my story. I am telling you my understanding of the community. You will have people who will share very different stories, and none of them are wrong. We have a lot of differences in our community, and that's part of its beauty. Now, I won't be able to see this, but I just want you guys to identify where the hand thing is, where you can just raise your hand, and raise your hand if you know someone who self-identifies as LGBTQ+. Now raise your hand if you work with someone who is self-identified as LGBTQ+. I forgot to add the pluses here. If you have a friend who self-identifies as LGBTQ, have a family member who self-identifies as LGBTQ+. For safety reasons, I don't ask if you identify within the spectrum of the LGBTQ community, because sometimes it is not a safe thing for people to share. Not every situation that we are in is a safe space. And I will share that I've been very out since I was about 24. And so where almost any forum or any community or any room that I'm standing in, people are aware of who I am. But not everyone in their community has the safety. I'm a big guy. I don't think you can tell it on a video, but I'm a big guy, and I stand 6 foot, and I'm large, so I can be imposing, and I have the ability to have people pause, before they say something or do something, because of my stature. Not everyone has that. I like to have a participant's bill of rights. And as an individual, you have the right to your own voice. You have the right to see others and be seen as an equal. You have the right to ask any questions without judgment. This is really the place where you get to ask someone questions you may not be comfortable asking normally. And if you step over a line, I'll let you know. But I've never had anyone do that. You also have the right to be free from verbal attacks. So people are not going to come at you. I'm not going to come at you, no matter what your viewpoint is. You have the right to be uncomfortable. This is an uncomfortable topic for many people. Not everyone have people who identify as queer in their lives, or are aware that they have someone who identifies as queer. You have the right to, other suggestions from participants, we'll skip that. Also just know that if we get a lot of questions, I will dictate the flow. I don't want us to get lost in one area when we have a lot to cover. Alrighty, but I am always open to further conversations down the road. Alrighty? Identification. How do you know if someone is part of the LGBTQ community? The most important way is that they will tell you. I mean, it's really important. It is not our place to give someone a label or make assumptions. Frequently, a lot of us have thoughts. We may say, oh, I think that person is part of the community. We only know if they've told us. I will often ask people who I think may be clearly part of the community, but I will still ask them their identification, because they may not be. And it's not my right to decide who they are. Especially when a lot of times who we are is viewed as a negative by some people. So, terminology, really important. Gender. This is a set of meanings assigned by a culture or society to someone's perceived biological sex. Gender is not static and can shift over time. Please remember that. Gender has at least 3 parts: physical markers, genitalia, chromosomes, etc., role expression, aspects of behavior and outward presentation that may communicate gender to others. Gender identity, an individual's internal view of their gender. So sometimes it's the way we express ourselves, how we dress. Some people may say, I don't know if you can see, my nails are painted. I don't do this as a matter of gender, but of identification within the queer community. But some people may view this as an expression of femininity. Gender identity is also how we view ourselves. Sexual orientation, the culturally defined set of meanings through which people describe their sexual attractions. Sexual orientation is not static and can shift over time. Sexual orientation has at least 3 parts: attraction, one's own feelings about which gender or genders they feel drawn to, behavior, what one does sexually and or with whom, sexual identity, the language and terms one uses to refer to their sexual orientation. I'm going to slip back to the sexual orientation is not static, which I also stated about gender. And the way I explain this is people often think that, if someone says, well, I'm gay today, I'm bi today, oh, I really like her or I really like him. And for some people, that seems very confusing. But the way I like to explain it is I love chocolate cake. I'm a big boy. I love chocolate cake. Sometimes, though, if you put maybe angel food or red velvet cake in front of me, I'm going to choose one of those instead. That doesn't mean I don't like chocolate cake anymore. So I'm not stopping being gay, but I may find myself attracted to another person who does not fit the identity that people expect. Alrighty? Transgender. It's a term used broadly that refers primarily to individuals who identify differently from the sex assigned at birth, or a term used by people for whom the sex they were assigned at birth is an incomplete or incorrect description of themselves. The term genderqueer has the same basic meaning, but it is used somewhat more loosely. Trans man is someone who goes from female to male. A trans woman is someone who goes from male to female. A lot of people struggle with that. These are terms you mostly should know. Gay is most frequently used by male identified people, but it can also be used for the entire community. Lesbian is most frequently used by female identified people who experience attraction primarily or exclusively for other female identified people. Bisexual, a term used to indicate attraction or potential for attraction to more than one gender. Pansexual, a term used to indicate attraction or potential for attraction to any gender, preferred by some over bisexual because it does not imply the existence of only two genders. And heterosexual and straight, a term used to indicate attraction primarily or exclusively for people of the opposite sex. What to call me? In the queer community, there's a lot of different language that people use. Omnisexual, male to female, trans, lesbian, androgynous, gender queer. I personally like the word queer. A lot of people my age generally don't. Queer was used to describe us as strange or different or odd. I like the word queer because I find it very empowering and very political. But a lot of people like very different language. And if you don't know how someone identifies or refers to themselves, you just ask them. Names and gender pronouns. One of the things I hear all the time is I don't know how to refer to someone. You ask them. How would you like to be identified as? Is there another name you'd like me to use? Some people, especially in the trans community, they let go of what they refer to as their dead name. Their dead name is their name as they were identified as they were the gender assigned at birth. But they now identify differently, so they don't want to use that name. So you ask people, what name do you like to use? What gender pronoun are you most comfortable with using? Avoid using gender pronouns when you don't know what a person is comfortable with, but if you make a mistake, a polite and sincere apology should fix it. Alrighty? I wouldn't get really hung up on if you refer to someone. I was in a class once and I referred to a trans woman as dude. Just because it slipped out, and I felt absolutely horrible, and they were so wonderful to me. But I felt horrible for a while, because you don't want to make that mistake. But as my teacher said, give myself the same grace I would have given someone else. gender pronouns. We have the traditional he, him, his, and for masculine, for feminine, she, her, hers. For gender neutral, there are a couple different versions. The two we'll show here are they, them, their. Some people struggle with that because it sounds like multiple people. So then you could use something like they, their, zer. I know I've met a couple people over the course of my life who use that. What I say to a lot of people is, because people say, well, this is stupid. Why do I have to do this? Because someone's asking you to respect their identity, to respect who they are. And I often say to people, show me exactly where it hurts you when you have to say they or they, or someone who had previously identified as he and is now she. It doesn't hurt us, and it actually benefits the other person if we can respect their identification. Gender nonconforming. Someone who does not conform to traditional gender roles or stereotype. Traditional roles and expectations vary based on different cultural and societal ideas. Individuals may be perceived as having a different gender than their outward appearance. Again, I have pierced ears, I wear nail polish, so someone may say that I'm expressing a feminine gender, but I'm not. I'm just being me. I guess maybe I'm sometimes gender nonconforming. I don't know. Transgender language, derogatory terms. These are all terms one should not use. Sex change, sex swap, tranny, transgenders, pre-op, post-op, she-male, he, she, transsexual, transgender, when used as a noun, is a transgender or a transsexual, gender bender, or hermaphrodite. That word is widely held to be offensive, and the term now used is intersex. So just be aware of that these are terms that you should not use when talking to people.
Just a comment that came in, Marek. Someone chimed in, no different than a Michael wanting to be called a Mike. I will call you whatever you want.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that person understands it didn't hurt them at all. And that's the easy, wonderful part. Inaccurate uses. Transgendered, not a synonym for transgender, similar to saying woman or Catholic. Transsexuality, the correct medical term would be transsexualism. A lot of people love this one. Gender identity confusion. Someone's not confused. They know who they are. The confusion is, how do the rest of us learn to adapt and understand what they're sharing with us? So referring to someone as born a man or born a woman. I will not lie, I've slipped and said that when trying to explain concepts. But again, we learn and we try to fix that. We make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up if you do, but be aware that that's not necessarily how someone wants to be identified. Another very popular one is trapped in the wrong body. Some trans people find this very appropriate, while others find that it oversimplifies a very nuanced experience. All right. It's not a race. A lot of people, when they look at people who are transgender, they look at and thinking, well, I see you at a different stage than I think you should be at. And the truth is, some people may choose to stop at one stage of transformation, while others will go the full way, and they don't have to do it overnight. It's a matter of, as you feel comfortable, as you grow, as you accept yourself and define how you want to present yourself is what you do. Coming out. Coming out is the process of self-identification, personal, public. There are numerous stages to coming out. The first one is coming out to oneself. I was 24 years old when I came out. I had known when I was much younger. I was 6 years old when I understood I was different, but I didn't know what that difference really was or meant. And the images I saw of queer people were not very flattering. And I knew I couldn't be one of those people because I loved myself. And it didn't make sense because in the media, queers were people who nobody loved and they didn't love themselves, or they were mean and catty. So I had a lot of trouble. And through my teen years, I worked really diligently at working really hard at having a deep bass voice, walking a certain way, presenting myself a certain way so that no one would confuse me with those people. So first is the process of coming out to yourself, accepting who we are. Next, and this can go in any order, some people tell family, some people tell friends first. Some people never go back and tell family. I know people who have never shared with their family stories of who they are. They skip right over to friends. Some people tell coworkers, many do not. And others are loud and proud in the community, such as myself. And which is a really important thing right now because we're finding that more and more of our community members are not feeling safe being out. So those of us who are in a position to be out, I work in an agency that is very, very supportive of me. I live in a community that is very welcoming and safe. I'm engaged in a lot of outside communities that are very welcoming and safe. So I have that available to me. Not everyone does. Some of it's based on where you live. If you're in a more rural area, coming out to everyone can be very difficult. It also can be very difficult in the city. And people will also often tell me that, oh, it's so much easier now, because people are so comfortable with who we are. And I would say to you, well, there is, and we'll get more into this because this is kind of a touchy area. Over the last 10 years, it has been much safer to come out. But the internal process of coming out is still very unsafe. And we still don't know when we come out, will our family and friends love us? The larger community will. But will our immediate friends and family still love us? We don't know. And so that's a very scary thing. Understanding desire, support for coming out. It can happen at any age regarding sexual orientation or gender identity. I had a gentleman when I worked at Gay and Lesbian Youth Services, which I know they call themselves something different now. They're still GLYS, but the GLYS means something different. But when I was working there, I took a phone call once and an 80-year-old man called and said, I just realized I'm a gay man. He was 80 years old. He was finally safe and comfortable coming out and expressing who he was. Ask a client or friend who's coming out if they have family or community support. So if you know someone who is going through the process and they've shared with you who they are, ask them, do they have support? If you're working with a client as a counselor or a case manager and they've shared with you who they are, talk to them about it. Be understanding of the fact that various safety concerns exist when someone is coming out: personal safety, threats of job loss, loss of residence, loss of family and friends. And these are just a couple of resources you can use. Locally, we have PFLAG of Buffalo. That pflag.org will take you to the national site, which will then divide up into regional sites. So, just my little graphic. He was coming out the closet. So now I'm going to start getting into some real tangible information. 40% of all homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. This is also true. This is a national number. This is also true locally in 2019. The point in time count, which is a yearly count of individuals who are homeless, they did one for youth. And the youth one mirrored the national numbers. We had 40% who identified as LGBTQ. A really interesting note to a really important thing to know is that there's a recidivism rate of 40% for youth who are homeless as adults. So 1 in 4 homeless youth will be homeless adults as well. And we talk a lot about youth homelessness, but 71% of all homeless LGBTQ individuals do not become homeless till after they turn 18. So there is a youth problem of LGBTQ homelessness. There's also an adult problem of LGBTQ homelessness. And remember, we're talking about 40% of the population is youth. And we are only, depending on who you're talking to, 3 to 10% of the population. Some other very sobering statistics: 58% of all LGBTQ people are sexually assaulted on the streets, compared to 45% heterosexual. I truly believe that number is sadly deflated. If you could double 58, I would say you do. Same thing with 45. I think the numbers are much higher. I think especially our youth, but also young adults and even older adults who are sexually assaulted on the streets. 43% of clients served by drop-in centers identified as LGBT. 30% of clients street outreach clients identified as LGBT. 30% of clients utilizing housing programs identified as LGBT. Just checking the time already. Just some general facts. I'm not going to go through all these, but 1 out of 4 compared to 1 out of 3 same-sex relationship experience domestic violence. People think because it's 2 men or 2 women, it may not be DV. It is. It's still the same thing. If someone is feeling fearful or being physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, it is DV. Gay and lesbian victims of domestic violence are also reluctant to seek help for fear that they don't want to be identified as being queer or in a same-sex relationship, and usually the perpetrator will hold that against them. If I knew someone recently who, when the partner broke up with him, he sent out videos or pictures to all of the partner's family, even though the partner has never told his family who he was. And so those are acts of domestic violence. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender youth are more than twice as likely to experiment with drugs and alcohol. Gay teens in U.S. schools are often subjected to intense bullying. So if someone's whispering in your ear, and you're going to have to excuse my language, but it's what we hear: "Listen, little faggot, I'm going to beat you up after class." Knowing what the algebraic term is for something is really unimportant when you know that you have to run for your life after school. With each instance of verbal or physical harassment, the risk of self-harm among LGBTQ youth is 2.5 times more likely. And an estimated 1.5 million adults are 65 plus are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. There is little information on older transgender adults. One of the things, I've just finished my master's and I focused everything on LGBTQ issues for every program. I did aging, I did just general research, I did it on homelessness, I did it on fair housing, etc. And the lack of research done on our community is really frightening. Much of the data I pulled up 10 years ago is the same data we're using now because there's nothing new. So it's really important. I think one of the things that we really have to switch is developing more research and more data collection on who LGBTQ people are. Transgender issues by the numbers. Homelessness: nearly 1/4 of respondents experience some form of housing discrimination. Nearly 1/3 have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. In the past year, 1 in 8 respondents experienced homelessness because of being transgender. More than 1/4 of those experienced homelessness in the past year avoided staying in a shelter because they feared being mistreated as a transgender person. I will tell you that when I started working in this community 11 and a half years ago, there wasn't a lot of understanding of people who identified as gay or queer, and specifically not of trans individuals who are transgender. Um, as recent as a year ago, I had trouble convincing shelters that by law they had to admit someone who identified as a trans woman or a trans man into their shelter. So they've struggled. I've seen things improve dramatically. I will tell you, overall, over the course of almost 12 years, things have improved dramatically. I don't want to name shelters, but shelters are really, they're stepping up to the plate and doing a lot more. Um, Transgender healthcare, 19% will refuse care due to being transgender, with higher numbers among people of color. 28% have been harassed in a medical setting. 50% said they had to teach medical providers about what specific care they needed. It's a problem. I mean, it's good that we can teach our providers, but our providers should already know who we are.
Another comment that came in, Marek. One of the reasons is the average lifespan of trans individuals is sadly low. Some intersections of personhood have a lifespan as low as 30 years old.
Yeah, the rate, especially trans women of color, of being murdered is just it's devastating. Um, I had the number, and maybe on another slide. I'm going to guesstimate, and I think it was 24. There were 26 trans women of color murdered that we know were murdered for being who they were. So that's one woman every 2 weeks, and that's only what we know about. The LGBTQ family is very diverse. 2 million children are raised by same sex couples. 41% identify as ethnically diverse. Some interesting things, though, is LGBT families of color tend to live in poverty. 32% of children living in LGBT families of color are living in poverty. 21% of children living in same sex families of color are living in poverty. 7% of children living in white same-sex families are living in poverty. LGBT families of color tend to report more discrimination. LGBT families of color report greater multi-generational support than white LGBT families. I find that really interesting because what often we're told is that the Black community specifically is not supportive of our LGBTQ members. And I will tell you, I was raised and grew up on the east side of Buffalo, and I never found problems. And what I always share with people is every family has Pookie, their cousin Pookie, who has their friend. And Pookie's friend always comes to all of the cookouts, all of the birthday parties, the weddings, and Pookie's girlfriend may not be discussed, but everyone knows who she is. And so that is really common. And I think that the myth of greater discrimination in the Black community is meant to kind of divide communities that have a lot in common and should be working together. And we'll go briefly over this. In 2011, New York State recognized same-sex laws. Uh, in 2015, it was required in all, the Supreme Court ruled it was required in all 50 states. I will share that there's active work towards removing that at a national level and certainly at a state level. New York passed the Sondel Law in 2003, which prohibits discrimination based on actual or perceived sexual orientation. In 2019, the equivalent of that, the gender law, was passed, which protects against discrimination based on gender expression or identity. Currently, and not at all in the foreseeable future, are there any laws outlawing discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender expression. In fact, quite the opposite is happening. In New York State, since 2014, genital reconstruction surgery is not required to change or get a new birth certificate. New York State has recently enacted laws that ban conversion therapy and consider gender expression and identity are protected classes. I'm assuming everyone knows what conversion therapy is. If you do not, it is basically where you go to a counselor who helps to convince you that you are not how you identify. So, especially for youth, that's really important because youth were frequently forced into conversion therapy, so to try to fix them, and that often leads to a high rate of suicide. I'm going to kind of go over this quickly. There's a lot regarding the update. There's been a significant increase in number of laws and bills proposed by both the state and federal levels. Currently, there are over 990 anti-transgender bills across 49 states. In 2023, it was 500. Of those, 120 have passed into law. If you've not noticed, there's a bit, while the current administration spoke of being supportive of our community, there have been a lot of executive orders which have done just the opposite. We are once again redefining sex and gender as only male and female. On federal IDs, you are no longer allowed to place the X gender marker. In the military, there's a ban on transgender people serving in the military. Healthcare and funding, the executive order halted federal funding for gender affirming care for individuals under 19, and there are efforts to eliminate coverage for transgender healthcare, Medicare, and Medicaid, and that's for all adults. Supreme Court has also ruled in the United States versus Scrimeti that bans on gender affirming care for minors are constitutional. So there's a real emphasis on really erasing who we are. An interesting side note, there is Stonewall, which is the place of the modern movement for queer people. There was a riot in 1969, and the federal website listed trans and queer people as being the primary folks who fought against the police coming in, which created the riot. And it has now been taken off. They still have the post about Stonewall, but they no longer mention trans or queer people. So there's a real effort and intent to erase parts of our community. Just checking time again. All right, we're doing pretty good. State legislatures are where the majority of anti-LGBTQ plus bills are being debated. These fall into several key categories. The health bans, which I mentioned already. And part of this is they are leading to felony charges for medical providers who try to offer care. So what you're seeing is you're seeing a real freeze. Even though executive orders are not laws, you're seeing a real freeze in people assisting communities. There are already many hospitals that have stopped doing gender affirming care. In education schools, there's sports bans. Over 1/3 of the states have passed laws banning transgender students from participating. I want to say the number of transgender athletes is 0.03, the percentage. So we're talking of a very small amount, but we're banning them because it scares people. The laws and the executive orders address public accommodations and identity. Public bathrooms, again, are being, transgender individuals are being banned from there again. I've seen a number of videos where specifically it's happened, I'm sure it's to others, but some videos where very masculine lesbians were going into the women's room and were assaulted, even though that is their proper bathroom according to these new rules, but they were being assaulted for going in there. Redefining sex. Several states have passed laws that legally define sex based on reproductive anatomy, chromosomes, or hormones, which can exclude transgender and intersex people from state non-discrimination protections. There are also efforts to prevent transgender people from updating their birth certificates and other official identification documents to reflect their gender identity. In New York State, we're lucky because we have a more progressive state, but a lot of that's still going on the national level and will infiltrate and impact us here as it does already. There are curriculum bills. These laws, often known as Don't Say Gay bills, restrict the teaching and discussion of sexual orientation in schools. If I was teaching, again, I taught for 8 years, and in some of these districts now, if I were to state that I had a partner who was male, that could lead to my being fired. There are religious exemptions laws now, which allow the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which allow individuals and businesses from refusing services to LGBTQ plus people. This is including medical providers. So we are limiting access to just services and medical care to people. There's a huge wave of drag bans where drag queens are considered dangerous, and communities and counties are trying to pass laws that say you cannot have a drag show within so many feet of children. It's really absurd. It's again, as it's a guise of protecting minors. There's also the criminalization of that a number of states are exploring regarding criminalizing being transgender in certain contexts, such as using a different name or pronoun at work. So that can get you in trouble. I know some people were required to remove just their pronoun identifications on their emails. And that's in New York State as well. Removal, and there's been there's been a movement towards the removal of anti-discrimination laws that currently protect the LGBT community. And they're also repealing housing protection laws. There's also, while this is not specifically geared towards queer people, it's really important to understand it impacts those who are most vulnerable. And that includes queer people and people of color, who are the highest numbers of people who are homeless in our communities. Again, you know that 40% of the youth are LGBTQ identified. In Erie County in 2023-24, 52% of the homeless population were African American men. That's a staggering number for a community that I believe comprise only 13% of our community. So this executive order, which again is not law, but is working towards becoming law, and a lot of people, and it scares people. So a lot of groups already enact this. There is the order stated to address endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontation, and violent attacks from the homeless people. So there is a real focus on homeless people being violent and aggressive. It links crime to the community. It redirects funding. A lot of the federal grants in that, and the money is drying up. The president wants to end housing first. And housing first is how most of the housing programs in our county run, which means that if someone is using or someone is struggling with addiction or mental health, the first order of business is to get them housing, and we don't evict them or remove them or refuse to assist them because they're having struggles in other areas of their life. The new executive order demands that they have to seek treatment, And as many of you know, even with the Housing First profile right now, there are so many people, both with addictions and mental health struggles, who refuse assistance for fear that they will be forced into a hospital or into a program they don't want to be. So we already have struggles with people participating with the program, so it would only get worse under this. This also attacks the harm reduction programs and finds them invalid. There's also increased disparities. The National Alliance to End Homelessness warned that the order will disproportionately harm vulnerable groups, including people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus youth, and people of color. Something really important to know is HMIS, which is a database for the collection of information of homelessness in Erie County and used throughout most of the nation. In Erie County, we are no longer allowed. I spent 5 years fighting for the inclusion of LGBTQ in the HMIS data. It took us a long time to get it down there. We can no longer collect it again. Why do we need to collect data about the LGBT communities? To raise visibility, to increase identification, to clear up misinformation, to be able to offer support to those individuals, and to target treatment and services as appropriate to their needs. If you ask members of the LGBTQ plus community who we are, you are not insulting us or labeling us. You're validating us. Now, this is an old slide, and I left it in there because this is when we were collecting the data. And this is when we were collecting the data, people were reluctant to ask. We will ask, what is your history of sexual assault? What is your history of trauma and abuse and addictions? But we were afraid to ask, who do you love? So I would often tell people this is why we ask. And now part of the problem is, now if we're going to be asked, there is a new fear that it may become part of a database to keep track of us. And so that's a real fear. Whether that is valid or not, the fear of that happening is very much there. What is homophobia? Homophobia is discrimination based on one's orientation, expression, real or perceived. That's really important because people can be discriminated against because somebody thinks they're gay or lesbian or transgender. So you don't actually have to even be part of the community to be discriminated against. It's harassment and bullying. It's name calling, teasing, jokes. We've all heard the jokes that are hugely inappropriate. It's not just queer people. One of the things I forgot to mention is when I give this, I focus very much, obviously, on queer people. But this whole thing is about treating people with respect, any community that you come in contact with, whether it's the Latin community, the African American, the Asian, the Muslim community, Christian community, whoever you come in contact, treat people with respect. Treating relationships of LGBTQ folks as less valid or different from opposite sex partners. When I get to this, I always talk about the story of the gentleman, Jeffrey Dahmer, who the last victim that he had was a 16-year-old boy who was running out of the building naked and screaming. And he told the cops who brought him back there that it was just a lover's fight and that it was not to be worried. And because the cops did not recognize or refused to recognize, one, that it was that two men is a valid relationship, and two, that there was something wrong here and that there was some sort of assault and violence going on. And there was a lack of caring for that. There's also, homophobia is also creating a hostile or unfriendly environment where LGBTQ people plus cannot safely come out in. How can an agency or individuals battle homophobia in the workplace? Become an ally. That's the most important thing you can do. For many, becoming an ally is not comfortable for fear of being thought of part of the community. How often have you heard when someone has stood up, someone else will say to them, "Oh, are you gay?" That's really not uncommon at all. But if it's hard for someone who's straight to come out, imagine how hard it is for someone who's queer. At your place of business, talk to HR, talk to supervisors, place safe zone stickers in your workspace. Uh, you can address it amongst your peers by not letting remarks slide. If someone tells a really horribly homophobic joke, call them out on it. I do it all the time. I don't hear as many as I used to, and people are obviously more careful around me because it's obvious who I am. Uh, Address unfairness of any type you see. Have it placed in the code of conduct. How can you address it with clients? Address things when they happen. Don't laugh or participate. I've had clients make some really horrible remarks, although I would say very few. But when I've had them, I had one client who kept saying the word faggot. And so I said, dude, I resemble that, and I'm really not comfortable with you using that language. And he apologized. It was just something he was really comfortable with because slurs to our community is something that people are comfortable with. So he stopped doing that, and that was really nice. And there was no real serious confrontation. He was fine with it. If you're not sure if it's offensive, imagine the comment with a different word based on one's ethnicity or cultural background. Instead of "that's so gay," "that's so Christian," "that's so womanish." We kind of do hear stuff like that, don't we? Stop acting like a girl. So we hear that already, so we know what that is. Does it sound bad? Yeah, it does. So again, call people out when you hear things like "that's so gay" or anything else that sounds like that. Communicating with coworkers and clients. Mirror their language. How do they identify their sexual orientation or partners? Their gender. I will frequently, when I was younger, was asked if I had a wife, and I'd have to correct that. Use gender neutral terms and pronouns until you're sure what to use. And if you goof up, don't worry. You ask things like, do you have a partner or spouse? Not do you have a wife or a husband? Are you currently in a relationship? What do you call your partner? Use the pronoun that matches the person's gender identity, not your perception, but their understanding and knowledge of who they are. Again, if you slip up, apologize. The client environment. Some of this is getting more difficult now. I would tell you, if you are an agency that you're able to, our agency still asks, create intake forms that include full range of sexual and gender identity and expression. Ensure confidentiality on forms. That is really more important than ever. I would often have a lot of clients ask me not to include who they wore on our intake packages or in HMIS. And so I would respect that reluctantly, and only reluctantly, not because I don't want to respect them, but because then that's less data we have. Train all staff to be respectful of LGBTQ clients and to use clients' preferred names and pronouns. And that's front staff, that's staff who are counselors and nurses and doctors, social workers. All of us should be aware and be respectful. Post non-discrimination policies inclusive of sexual orientation and gender identity where and when you can. Again, remember, a lot of this is no longer allowable in some communities and some agencies. Display images that reflect LGBTQ lives, posters, books. I always tell people the best way to let your client know that you are safe is they have a poster on your wall or have books. I know when I'm in a counselor's office, I scan really quickly their books, see what they have. And if I see something that reflects my life, I feel a little safer. Provide educational brochures and information on LGBTQ health topics. Offer unisex bathrooms. What is an ally? An ally is straight people who don't permit bullying or discrimination around them based on sexual or gender identity. I always mean to put this slide back a couple slides, sorry. Who can be an ally? Anyone. All you need to do is be a person who speaks out against bias or intolerance. Staff environment. Offer diversity training to staff and update regularly. Gender neutral bathrooms for staff as well. Include gender identity or expression or gender identity among the list of protected categories in your non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies. Institute protocols for gender transitions for individuals. Change transition employees' name and gender in all personnel and administrative records. Dress code should reflect a non-bias towards stereotypes of how someone is supposed to dress. Medical necessary treatments and procedures such as those defined by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health Standards for care for gender identity disorders, that's a lot to say, should be included in employee-provided healthcare and short-term disability coverage. Oh, wow, I really went through that quickly. It's really different working with a crowd. So this is actually the closing. One day a girl met a girl and they became friends and they fell in love and nobody thought it was strange or weird at all. I want to share too also that some of you may know that we had a huge panel discussion last month regarding starting an LGBTQ shelter. We are actually meeting with a church this week to start moving that forward. In the US, there are only 2 shelters for adults. I'm not clear. I've tried to get clear numbers on the number for youth. I haven't been able to get that. But there's only 2 for adults in our entire nation. And things are getting tougher, and we're finding a lot more LGBTQ homeless. And also there is an uptick in homeless seniors. And amongst those homeless seniors would be LGBTQ seniors. So if you're interested in working with us towards the development of a shelter, please hit me up regarding that. You have my email. I'm going to send this so they can post this, and hopefully everyone can get a copy of it. And I will open it up to questions.
Thanks, Marek. Great presentation and so much information that we can all use. So yes, if anyone has questions, feel free to chat them in and we'll make sure they get answered here.
And do not hesitate to ask anything you're not sure if you should ask. This is a time when you can ask something that you're not sure of. I'm going to stop sharing as well.
While people are putting in any questions, Amy has posted a few links in the chat. There is the link to our evaluation. So we just ask that everyone takes a few minutes to fill that out. There's a link for the new training series that the Erie County Department of Health is launching. And I think the last link is our October session of our training collaborative on digital wellness. So please take a moment and check that out. Then I'll turn it back over to you, Marek.
Yeah, any questions at all? I think one of the truths is the community we get to attend these sort of things are people already open and have some general understanding, but there may still, I often find that, the queer community changes constantly. As a 60-year-old man, the community I started off in and grew up in is very different now, so ask away. We don't always know exactly what's going on. So, or particulars about why we do stuff. Like if you have questions why the community is the way it is, just ask.
Any questions? Yeah, a few comments. Great presentation, easily digestible information. And another one, thank you so much and thrilled to hear there may be movement on LGBTQ plus shelters.
Yes. I think we're actually going to have one. We're probably going to start first as a drop-in center because that's easier. As anyone here, if anyone here works in a shelter, they know the laws and that the requirements, the policies, etc., are really strict, and we need to, for sure, shore up and show that we have a need for an LGBTQ shelter, and a drop-in center will do just that. But if someone wants to help and knows a way we can get a shelter right away, please step up. We're getting a lot of support from politicians locally and nationally, and so things are really moving in the right direction. So I don't have anything more specific, although if you give me permission, I will speak for hours. So
I don't see any specific questions that came in. Oh, one last comment. It says, thank you for confirming the needs for all ages in this community.
yeah, that was one thing that really surprised me. I'd had a gentleman, I believe he was 72 years old. He had never worked officially because his partner had owned an antique store. And so he just worked with his partner, and his partner passed away 10 years previously. And so slowly he had to sell off each and every one of the antiques they had amassed. And finally he became homeless. And that's a truth regarding our community. One of the things I like to share too about our community is where a lot of other communities don't have it, we don't have family to fall back on. Usually if you're queer and homeless, it's because your family is not in a place where they are comfortable supporting you. Hopefully that family comes around, but that's not always the case. So we always don't necessarily have a family to fall back on. And that can be very difficult.
There's a question that came in. Are there ways we can lobby to speak up against bills in our state or community that may harm the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, I would write to your representatives if you see something. I mean, I'm seeing some, I don't know if there's locally, but I know in New York State, there's bills uh, being brought up for discussion, and they're looking to pass, which are really discriminatory. So I would really say, start talking to people. Try not to be silent. This is a scary time. It's a scary time to speak out. We see what's happening with ICE and that, and people are just being removed, and so this is fear. And fear and intimidation often works to silence people. And so if you're in a place where you can speak out, again, I'm a big guy. I have a large platform. I'm able to speak out, and so I do that. But we have monthly community meetings in which I hear more and more of our community groups are going in hiding. They're removing their Facebook posts and their profiles. They don't feel safe. They're being attacked regularly. When I posted positive stuff about the shelter, some of the just vile remarks I saw were just, they weren't surprising. I guess that's what's most disturbing. It was very much what I expected.
Another comment that had come in. This one is, I think it might be a good idea to change full-time gender presentation to possibly be more inclusive of gender fluid individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot that we have to do, I believe. And I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. There was a time where I won't lie, I'm 60. I thought my work was done. And now I see that the work for supporting the queer community is even more important than ever. So I'm stepping up and doing what I can. I'm one individual, and hopefully there's more of us and more people can do stuff. And I also respect the fact that some people don't feel safe in talking. That's a really important thing. It's not safe for everyone to stand up. But if you're in that position, please do so.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. Great information, great presentation. The recording and slides from today's presentation will be posted to our webpage in the next few days, so feel free to check that out along with any of our past offerings. Again, our future notices will be emailed out, or you can go to our website to register for those as well. And if you're interested in being a presenter or have a topic in mind, please indicate that on your evaluation, or you can email us.
Oh, and as a side note, if you have an agency that you would like me to come speak at, I can. So just putting it out there. If you'd like more training for more people, I do that. I announce it all the time at the meetings I'm at. So thank you. And thank you guys for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.